finally, on to the world building of the year, in a sense, the climax of our year, supported, of course, by Grower, our founder partner. Here was the super jury that I had the pleasure of chairing today. A very nice day, really good people. Abdelkader Damani from Frac Centre, associated with the Orléans Biennale. Christina Salem from Studio Salem. Kim Herforth Nielsen, founder of 3XN, co-founder and principal. And Nuno Gonçalves from Tara, a lovely Portuguese connection, who's an associate partner at Meccano. And we had 18 wonderful buildings to look at, and we had to remind ourselves when we were making a final decision that it wasn't a question of the 17 of them were in any sense losers. These are all winners of their category, but of course we did have to choose one that we thought was just a bit more outstanding than the others. So here we go with the shortlist. Higher education and research. We saw this earlier in relation to the Timber Prize, the Innovation Hub in Rotorua, RTA and Irving Smith. The sport winner, the Ken Rosewall Arena redevelopment in Sydney by Cox Architecture. This amazing translucent roof placed with great ingenuity over an existing a concrete bowl. A glorious project. This is really a cultural centre. It's an art centre and a performing arts centre with two architects, Durbat Block Jaggers and John Wardle Architects, working in what turned out to be a very harmonious relationship and a very creative result. The housing winner, again in Australia, this time in Melbourne, and John Wardle working on their own, tripartite building with a conserved brick base, then unashamedly contemporary aesthetic with what goes above, partly taking its cue from the geometry of grain silos, which were a feature of this area. The school winner, the Fortitude Valley State Secondary College in Brisbane by Cox Architecture and Thompson Adset. Well, this set a kind of new sort of standard for this area, because it's very unusual to have a sort of dense urban type structure in a suburban context. It set challenges. It was something that the Education Authority promoted. There was positive input from the head teacher, the principal, and the result we felt was a great success. The religion winner, really amazing project by Tezuka Architects. This image doesn't quite, it's actually very difficult to get a single image that conveys just how special this is. And there's a facade with cut out pieces, hand cut by the architect who works on this project for what must have seemed like an eternity, to get an extraordinary chapel filled with natural light. And really not quite like anything I think we'd seen before. The new and old winner, we've seen this already, the Capsule Hostel, fabulous project, and making use on a minimal site of 230 square metres of a fading existing structure to produce something very special. The shopping winner, Shanghai Urban Architecture and Design. Well, they won this for a project which, instead of conventional demolition, which was certainly on the cards, they essentially said, well, we've got to keep all the protected buildings on the site, but actually what we want to do is to do analysis of all the other buildings on this site and find out, even if they're not protected by law, what their particular characteristics and virtues are, and see what we can do with them. So this is essentially a sort of conservation project which takes the retail component as the mainspring for a delightful piece of urbanism. The completed buildings, house and villa, there are two awards in this thing. One is for things that are in a urban or suburban context. This is the Sky House in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, by MIA Design Studio. And the point about this house was to allow the occupier to avoid any view whatsoever of what looked to be a pretty hideous agglomeration, cluster of concrete towers very nearby. So this is a small site next to a very big sort of rather anonymous, sort of worse sort of modernism, you might say. And the light well and the planting coming out of the windows and holes in the walls was a real pleasure to see. The hotel and leisure winner, a very, very sophisticated project by Studio Lotus. Again, like many of the projects we've seen today, making use of an existing facility. This is next to a dam. There've been an irrigation centre. There'll be buildings of different uses, and the latest of which is a kind of delightful hotel with tent roofs and a series of private and social spaces, which made us all start reaching for our passports. Completed buildings, production, energy and recycling. Well, this does all of that in spades. The Copenhagen projects in Copenhagen, a waste to energy plant. The office winner, Older Fleet, also in Australia. Good showing from Australia this year. By Grimshaw, where the tower at the back of this image is connected to three historic buildings, late 19th century buildings, which form the frontage to Collins Street, for those of you who know Melbourne. And therefore the design challenge was both to relate these to each other, creating a through route, a sort of lane, a cut through the urban block, and providing a contemporary workspace above. A really ambitious project. The health winner, a mixed team here, Link Architecture, 3XN, Nicky and Partners, and Christine Jensen's Tegnestue. And I should say that Kim Nielsen from 3XN, of course, stepped out of the virtual room when this was discussed by the judges, and took no part in proceedings, and nor did he present it, just to make that clear. This is a piece of kind of Scandinavian hospital design which took a plan form of a kind of in and out plan with a central spine, which, without knowing it, proved itself to be admirably capable of coping with COVID hospital services at the start of the pandemic, and is one of those sort of pieces of timeless health design you wish, well, all hospitals should have the spirit of this in them. The mixed use winner, the Post building in London by Alford Hall, Monaghan Morris. One of two or three redundant post office buildings, extraordinary volumes in what had been an industrial storehouse, which had no elevators in it because that wasn't how they moved the mail about. In fact, they moved it to subterranean tunnels and rail network, which is still there. And this has been converted for retail at ground level, workspace, but then social affordable housing. We don't have time to go into the details here, but it's a very rare example of providing social housing in a very high value area in central London. The civic and community winner, a community building, which is a library, which is the more important element, library or the community. It's actually both. Kirkkonummi Library, which improves on an existing facility in an exemplary way by JKMM Architects. And then the display winner, pretty up to date. This is the Sustainability Pavilion at the Dubai Expo 2020, which of course opened a year late. It's on now in Dubai. Architects Grimshaw, who've managed to produce a net zero building. It powers itself, it provides its own water, it generates everything, it harvests, and it's not a pavilion in the sense, well, let's throw it away when the expo's over. This is a permanent building which will be the hub of a science and innovation district in Dubai. Here's the other house and villa. Judge is very taken with this, Coopworth in Bruny Island, Tasmania. And this is, in a sense, it's a modest house for a couple who are farmers. And although they're not in the image, this is right in the middle of where the sheep graze, and the sheep are quite interested in that grazing. The sheep come and live in the house, well, not live in the house, they'd like to if they could. So part of the program is to make sure that man and beast could enjoy each other's company without absolutely close proximity, at least in a domestic environment. And then the transport winner, the Moynihan Train Hall, New York, USA, by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And some of our older attendees will recall that in the early 1960s, in a really disgraceful piece of anti-urbanism, that Penn Station in New York City was demolished to make way for nothing hugely memorable. And in a sense, this is a sort of repair job, because this building is directly opposite on 8th Avenue, opposite the old Penn Central demolished building. But the tracks that went into Penn Central also ran under this building, also by McKim, Mead and White, originally I think 1914. And this building, its original use, was for mail, rather like the Post building in London. So you had the entire mail of the northeast of the United States passing through this building. So what's happened with this project, which has taken 25 years to achieve, is the reconnection of McKim, Mead and White to both the Amtrak, the railroad and the subway system at this location. So this is a kind of marvellous kind of apology for what happened in the past, I suppose, but it's the most constructive sort of apology that you could imagine. So we come to which of these 18 projects is the World Building of the Year winner. And I'm going to ask Carl Lennon, representing Grower this evening, to come and join me on our stage in our studio here.
I see.
Carl, hi, very good you could make this. So just to prove that we are live here and not completely virtual. What the judges said about the winner was that it addresses the role of architecture in the new world of net zero and recycling. And it treats infrastructure projects in a way which makes people say, yes, in my backyard, rather than no. It encourages designers to think beyond the brief, to argue for ideas, and to ride the tides of both politics and economics in the pursuit not just of a great architectural idea, but in pursuit of the socially beneficial. And incidentally, it reminds us that buildings can be fun. Carl, tell us who the winner is.
Well, first off, a pleasure to be here today, and congratulations to everybody in hosting a fabulous event. And congratulations to the winner, which is Copenhill, the Waste to Energy project by BIG.
Many congratulations to BIG. This project, of course, has been published. And as I said earlier, of course, we've got 2 years worth of projects here. I think this project was actually finished at the end of 2019. As you can see, the ski slope on top of this waste to energy plant is its most Instagrammable feature. But the presentation and the story that we heard, this is much more than, as it were, a kind of a sort of leisure one-liner. Not at all. The original brief was simply to skin an existing facility, and the dilemma and the fear of the client was that it would take years and years and years to create a waste to energy plant, because they're so unpopular usually with local communities for all sorts of reasons, some of them quite understandable. So when BIG looked at this, they started thinking about, well, what is it that we could do which would involve more than skinning a kind of new facility? And actually, when you look at that and you start thinking about the structure you're going to have to put in place to support all this, if you're doing that, well, what else might that support? And if you were going to put a roof on it, what might it be that you might be able to do with a roof? And of course, since it snows in Denmark, the idea emerged of a kind of ski slope thing in this context, in an area which has considerable leisure uses already, including yachting and dinghies and other water sports. So the client realized that a project which added a leisure element and could be an attraction in its own right, rather than simply performing its primary function of turning, millions of tons of waste into something useful, they realized that actually they were going to save an awful lot of money in lawyers' fees, because probably instead of having to fight to get this facility built, potentially it would actually become an attraction. They would get planning permission more quickly, and that changed the financial dynamics of the project. And eventually it wasn't quite as simple as that, because there were political arguments, an interesting political argument about, does this represent the best and final state of a net zero world? Well, it doesn't, in the sense that we shouldn't be producing all that rubbish and waste in the first place. But on the other hand, there clearly will be a period of transition when we are still going to be producing waste. What are we going to do with it? We should be doing something worthwhile. And I guess the conversation we had in the jury was partly to do with getting architects to think about and get engaged with the sorts of buildings that are going to emerge as a result of a sort of second or third industrial revolution, a revolution without fossil fuel, a revolution without waste, a revolution based on a planetary requirement, a planetary incentive, rather than the first industrial revolution with its dependence on heat. So we felt very comfortable about this, because although there were other projects which we looked at, I'll name the ones that very much caught the judge's eye for conversation. The Phoenix Central Park in Sydney, by that pair of architects working together, the Capsule Hotel, which won the Interiors Prize, the Finnish Library, also with a big community use. These were all wonderful projects, and one or two others. But in the end, we felt that the message from this building is not to encourage students to start putting ski slopes on roofs. The real encouragement is to clients and planners and governments, and to the architectural profession itself, to ensure that design engagement with these sorts of projects makes the most of potential opportunities which are only just starting to emerge. And I think we feel confident that this can and will happen, because so many of the award winners across the categories actually, and across the sections, have shown an interest in the creative reuse of the new, exploiting the past in a good way rather than demolishing it, and really looking forward in as positive a way as possible to the challenges, which will be considerable, of course, in designing, in specifying, in supervising, but above all, I think, in arguing for the right things in the future to come. Well, I think I mentioned earlier this week that I felt a sort of spirit, and I always do, feel a spirit of relentless optimism in seeing all this wonderful work presented to us and all the contributions of our conference speakers over the last 4 days. And I suppose in the end, WAF is both a place where, in Jeremy Melvin's words, it's possible to have a big conversation about the issues that are affecting architecture, but it's also, of course, possible to reward and to celebrate exemplary achievement. That's about it from me. We look forward to seeing you in Lisbon next year.